After my father's funeral, I thought grief was the hardest part. Then I opened a box of his documents and discovered the secret that would change my life forever. We never had much growing up, but I never thought we were poor. Our house was small, but clean. The walls were a little faded, and the kitchen cabinets squeaked when you opened them, but it felt like home. We never ate out unless it was a birthday. Even then, it was some cheap buffet place off the highway where the soda came in plastic cups and the ice cream machine was always broken. Dad used to say, "We live within our means." That's the honest way to do it. He said it with pride, like it was something sacred. And back then, I believed him. Vacations were rare. I think we went to the lake once when I was 8, maybe 9. We stayed in this dusty little cabin with bunk beds and no air conditioning. I remember sweating through the nights and swatting mosquitoes off my arms, but I also remember Dad smiling like he had just taken us to Disneyland. Birthdays were quiet affairs. A homemade cake, a couple of dollar store balloons, and a present wrapped in the comics section of the newspaper. I never asked for much, and even when I did, he would tell me, "We can't keep up with the neighbors, son. That's how people go broke." I wore hand-me-downs from my cousin Dylan until I hit 9th grade. You could still see his name written in Sharpie on the tags. Our car was always used. Always something with a dented bumper or a weird sound in the engine. But it got us where we needed to go. I thought it was all part of some wise plan. I figured Dad knew something the rest of the world didn't. That he was saving smart, putting money away for rainy days, or maybe for my future. There was this quiet dignity in the way he handled things. At least, that is what I told myself. Looking back, I realized there were signs. Subtle things. Dad was always the one who paid the bills. No one else touched them. Mom would sometimes ask how things were going, and he would just wave her off. "Taken care of," he'd mutter, not even looking up from the paper. And those envelopes. I remember them stacking up near the door. Unopened. Just sitting there like furniture. One time I asked him why he never opened the mail. He gave me this look, part annoyance, part warning, and said, "Most of it's junk. You don't need to worry about it." I dropped the subject. I think that was the first time I felt it, this low, uneasy feeling in my gut. Like maybe things weren't quite as solid as he made them seem. But I pushed it aside. Because he was Dad. Because when you're a kid, you trust that your parents know what they're doing. You believe in the way they build your world. And my father? He built ours on a foundation I never saw until it started to crack. Dad had this rule he never spoke out loud, but we all followed it just the same. You don't ask about money. He handled it all. Every bill, every check, every conversation with the bank. He kept a little black zippered pouch in the desk drawer where he stored receipts and envelopes, but he never let anyone else near it. Not even Mom. Once, when I was around 14, I saw her reach for that drawer while cleaning. Dad snapped. Not loud, not aggressive, but firm. He stood up from his recliner, walked over, and shut the drawer himself. "Private things stay private," he told her. And that was the end of it. From then on, she never went near that drawer again. Neither did I. It was just understood. Finances were Dad's business, and asking questions was seen as disrespectful. He had this quiet way of making you feel small if you pressed too hard, like you were accusing him of something when all you wanted was to understand. And so we tiptoed. We learned to live with the tension without ever acknowledging it. Every now and then, strange little things would happen. Like the time the power got shut off for a few hours in the middle of a summer afternoon. Dad blamed it on some citywide outage, but our neighbors still had their lights on. Or when the landline started ringing more often, unfamiliar numbers with no names attached. He would answer in a low voice, say a few words, then hang up fast. Once I caught him clenching the receiver like it was burning his hand. Even at the grocery store, he had a particular way of checking out. He would always have a few different cards in his wallet and would fumble through them like he was picking a lock. Sometimes one would get declined, and he would mutter something about magnetic strip issues before quickly swiping another. It was never a big scene. He made sure of that. But I saw it. Little red flags, all over the place. But I convinced myself it was just how grown-up life worked. Maybe bills got tight sometimes. Maybe cards just glitched. We did not live fancy, but we never went hungry. That had to mean something, right? Still, I remember one night, maybe 2 or 3 years before everything unraveled. I heard him on the phone late, past midnight. I had gotten up for a glass of water, and his voice was just loud enough to slip through the crack in the living room door. "No, I just need a few more weeks," he said, voice tight and tense. I'm expecting something to come through. I'll make it right. He hung up quick when he noticed I was nearby. Gave me a smile that felt wrong on his face. Tired. Forced. He ruffled my hair, told me to get back to bed. I nodded and went. But I remember standing in the hallway for a while, staring at the door like it might give me answers. That was the thing with Dad. He kept everything locked tight. His mouth, his finances, his emotions. And the rest of us just learned to live in that locked-up world. But locks do not hold forever. Sooner or later, something breaks. When Dad passed, it felt like the world cracked sideways. It was a stroke. Sudden. Quick. No warning. 1 minute he was in the backyard pruning the rose bushes he never let anyone else touch, and the next minute he was gone. Collapsed right there in the dirt with garden shears still in his hand. We buried him the following week. Closed casket. Rainy day? Everything felt gray. People came by with casseroles and long faces, telling me how strong I was and how Dad was a man of principle. That line came up a lot. A man of principle. I nodded along. Thanked them. Stood by Mom as she trembled through hugs and condolences. But inside, I was just numb. There is something strange about grief when it comes tangled with confusion. You want to cry for the person you lost, but you also start replaying old moments, wondering what pieces you missed, what truths were hiding behind those familiar eyes. After the funeral, it fell to me to help sort through Dad's things. Mom could not do it. She tried, opened one drawer, touched one of his old jackets, and then broke down. So I told her I would take care of it. I started in the garage. Tools. Old license plates. A mountain of screws in mismatched jars. It was cluttered, but harmless. Nothing there told me anything I did not already know. Then I moved inside. That little desk drawer in the corner of the living room. The one he always guarded like it was sacred. That was where things changed. I opened it slowly, almost expecting alarms to go off. Inside was the same old zippered pouch I had seen 100 times. Black leather, worn around the edges. It smelled like dust and paper. I placed it on the table and unzipped it. The first thing I saw was an envelope. Not sealed, just folded over. Inside were 6 credit cards. All different banks. All maxed out. I flipped them over. Some had faded stickers on the back. Do not use unless emergency, written in Dad's handwriting. The second envelope was worse. A printout from a collections agency. Balance owed, $32,000. I froze. 32. That number should not have existed in my family's world. Dad always said we never bought what we could not pay for. He acted like debt was a disease other people got. Not us. But the letters kept coming. Piled one after another. Car loan late notices. Overdraft warnings. Personal loan denials. Even payday loan statements with sky-high interest rates. I just kept pulling them out of the pouch, like some cursed magician's trick. Every document made my hands shake a little more. I found a yellow sticky note tucked into one folder. Dad's handwriting again, scratchy and rushed. Keep this hidden. They do not need to know. I stared at that note for a long time. And then I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and threw up in the sink. The next morning, I went back to the desk and opened every drawer like I was defusing a bomb. There were more papers, tucked behind manuals, wedged under old bank calendars, even inside a thick envelope labeled tax stuff. Do not touch. I touched it. Inside were years of late filings. IRS notices. Missed property tax payments. Letters warning of liens if balances were not settled. One document had red ink scribbled across the top. Final warning. I stared at the handwriting, trying to decide what was worse, the debt, or the fact that he had buried it so carefully. Like a secret life hidden in plain sight. I kept thinking, how did he keep this all hidden for so long? The answer hit harder than I expected. He was good at it. Too good. He had trained us never to ask questions. And Mom. God. Mom really had no idea. She came into the living room while I was still sorting, eyes red and puffy, holding a mug with shaking hands. I started to say something but stopped. She sat down on the couch and stared at the fireplace like she wanted to disappear into it. I asked her, gently, if she had known about any of this. She blinked, looked confused. Known what? I hesitated, then showed her one of the credit card statements. $10,000. Multiple cash advances. She took it in her hands and looked at it like it was in another language. He never told me, she whispered. He always said we were okay. She repeated that last part again, softer. He always said we were okay. It broke something in me. I wanted to be angry, wanted to yell, "How could you not see?" But she looked like a woman watching her whole life unravel in real time. Later that afternoon, I found a manila envelope in the back of Dad's closet, taped shut. On the front, in block letters, it said, "For after I'm gone." I opened it like I was cracking into a coffin. Inside was a handwritten letter. 3 pages. No greeting. No dear son. Just straight into it. He said he was sorry. Said he never meant for things to get so bad. That it started small, just a little help here and there with bills, hoping he could pay it off next month. But then the car broke down. Then the roof needed repairs. Then a loan got denied and he panicked. He said he was ashamed, too proud to admit he had messed up. So he kept covering it, shifting it, moving money from one card to the next like a desperate game of shell and pea. And then the lie got too big to unwind. At the bottom of the 3rd page, he wrote, "I tried to protect you both, but I may have only delayed the damage." I folded the letter back up and sat in silence for a long time, because that was the moment I realized something that made my skin go cold. The debt was not just emotional. It was real, and it was mine now. The first call came 3 days after the funeral. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the stack of documents still spread out in front of me like some sick jigsaw puzzle, when the phone rang. It was an unknown number from a state I had never been to. I answered without thinking. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. Professional in that way that feels just slightly threatening. They asked for my father by name. I told them he had passed away. There was a pause. Then the voice shifted. "I am very sorry to hear that," he said, but I could tell he had said it 1,000 times before. "However, we do need to discuss the outstanding balance on his account." I asked what account. He gave me a number. A loan from a company I had never heard of. $7,000, unpaid. I told him again, Dad was gone. And then, like a brick to the chest, he asked if I was the executor of the estate. I said yes. Another pause. This one longer. "Then I am afraid we will need to speak further." That was the beginning. The second call came the next day. Different company. This one was louder, more aggressive. They did not care about condolences. They wanted answers. They wanted money. By the end of the week, I had received 5 calls, 2 letters, and a visit from a process server who handed me a thick envelope I did not even want to open. Everywhere I turned, there was another bill with my father's name, and my name now attached to it by default. I started researching, reading up on what happened to debt when someone passed. Some of it was protected. Some of it was not. Some of it could still land on my shoulders, depending on how things were structured, how Dad had set things up. But that was the thing. He had not set anything up. No will. No trust. No instructions beyond that envelope labeled "For after I'm gone." Just chaos. And suddenly, I found myself sitting across from a probate attorney, surrounded by folders and ledgers, asking questions I never thought I would be forced to ask. The attorney was kind, but blunt. "I will be honest with you," she said. "Your father left behind more than memories. He left behind liabilities. This will not be quick, and it will not be painless." I stared at her, tried to form words. Eventually, I just said the one thing I kept thinking. "But I thought we were okay." She looked at me, gently, and replied, "A lot of people do." I went back to the house that night and just stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the things I used to believe were signs of stability. The worn couch, the dusty bookshelves, that ugly green lamp Dad always kept by his recliner. None of it was fancy, but it all felt safe, familiar. But now, every object felt different. Every piece of furniture looked like part of a stage set, like we had been living inside a theater built on lies, and Dad had been the one directing the whole show. I found myself asking the same question over and over. Why? Why not tell us? Why not come clean when it started going south? Why fake a life of careful living while quietly piling up disaster behind the walls? Part of me wanted to believe it was about love, that maybe he was trying to shield us. Keep the stress away from Mom. Spare me from worry while I focused on school or work. But the other part of me, the part that kept getting those angry phone calls from creditors, was not so sure. Because this was not just 1 or 2 missteps. This was years of hiding, years of covering and spinning. And somewhere along the way, he had to have made a choice. Not once, dozens of times. He could have sat us down, could have asked for help, could have admitted he was drowning. Instead, he smiled through every birthday, grilled burgers in the backyard like nothing was wrong, gave speeches about living within our means, while digging a deeper hole under our feet. I started remembering moments that had always felt off but never fully landed until now. Like how tense he used to get when I brought up taking out student loans. He always shut it down quick. No son of mine is going into debt for college. Or the way he dismissed my offer to help with groceries after I got my first job. We're fine, he had said. Keep your money. Save it for when it matters. And Mom, God, she had been living in the same illusion. She believed in the man who promised security. She never saw the cracks, or maybe she did, and convinced herself they were shadows. Either way, we were both left picking up the pieces. That night, I opened his old toolbox in the garage. It was full of random screws, stripped wires, and broken flashlights. At the bottom, beneath a rusted hammer, I found a tin cigar box. Inside were more receipts. One was from a pawn shop. He had pawned his wedding ring. He never told Mom. Another was for a payday loan dated 6 months before he passed. The interest rate made my stomach turn. This was not about protecting us. Not anymore. This was about pride. About hiding the shame. About keeping the mask on at all costs, even when it crushed everyone else underneath it. And right then, standing in that cold garage, surrounded by secrets, I stopped feeling sorry. I just felt angry. A week later, I was clearing out the closet in my parents' bedroom, half dreading what I might find next, half hoping I was finally done uncovering skeletons. I was pulling down a stack of shoeboxes from the top shelf when something odd happened. The shelf panel shifted. It was slight, barely noticeable, but when I pressed my hand to the back, I felt it move. Behind it was a recessed panel in the wall, a small safe. No one had ever mentioned it. Not Mom. Not Dad. It had no keypad, just a keyhole. And I had no key. I spent the next 3 hours turning the house upside down. Kitchen drawers. Basement boxes. The glove compartment in the old Buick that had not run in years. I finally found the key tucked behind a stack of old phone books in the hall closet. Classic Dad. Hide the important thing in the most inconvenient place imaginable. I brought it back, slid it into the lock, and turned. The safe opened with a dry click. Inside, there were no stacks of cash. No insurance policies. No clever plan to save us from this mess. Just 2 things. A manila folder labeled "Do Not Share," and a sealed envelope addressed to me. I opened the envelope first. It was another letter. This one shorter. He wrote that he had planned to tell me everything someday. That he knew the truth would catch up eventually, and he was sorry I had to carry it. He said I would understand why he kept it secret once I read what was in the folder. He ended with, "I know you will do the right thing, even if I did not." My hands shook as I opened the folder. Inside were printouts, emails, transactions, but not just about him. They were about me. College savings accounts that were drained without my knowledge. My name listed as an authorized user on credit lines I never signed up for. Even a forged signature, mine, on a private loan application. That was the moment I stopped breathing for a second. He had used my name. He had taken out credit in my name while I was still in college. I had been too distracted trying to make ends meet on scholarships and late-night shifts to ever notice. And he had buried it well, used alternate addresses, made minimum payments just long enough to keep it hidden. That was the twist I never saw coming. He had not just hidden his own mess. He had folded me into it. I sank down onto the carpet, folders still open, unable to move. The man I had looked up to had stolen from me. Not money, not just that, but trust, safety, my future. And now, even though he was gone, I was the one left cleaning up the disaster he had left behind. He called it protecting the family, but it felt a hell of a lot more like betrayal. I spent the next few days making phone calls I never imagined I would have to make. Credit bureaus, fraud departments, financial institutions that had my name on their records, but no real connection to me, other than the one my father had forged. Every time I said the words, "That account was opened without my consent," I felt like I was peeling off another layer of my own skin. Some places were helpful, others not so much. One woman on the phone actually sighed and said, "Unfortunately, since he was your father, and you were listed as an authorized user, you may still be responsible for the balance." I sat there staring at the floor, listening to her read off numbers that sounded more like hospital bills than credit cards. 13,000, 9,000, another 5, sitting in collections, with my name printed at the top. I kept thinking about all those years Dad said we were okay, that we were smart with money, that we lived within our means. No, we lived under a mask. And when that mask finally cracked, it came down on me. The lawyer I had hired told me the odds of getting everything reversed were slim. You can contest the charges, she said, but proving fraud when it happens inside a family is complicated. I could hear what she was not saying out loud. It looks bad, no matter how you explain it. Meanwhile, Mom was still lost. I do not blame her. She had been living in the same story I had. She never saw behind the curtain either. But now she kept asking if we were going to lose the house. I could not answer. Because the truth was, I did not know. There was no insurance policy, no savings account, no cushion to land on. Everything Dad left us was in the red. Even his life had been borrowed. I found out later he had stopped paying his own life insurance premiums years ago. I guess that was the final illusion, that even in death, he could somehow provide. But all he left were debts, forged documents, and a son choking on the weight of a last name that now felt more like a brand than a bond. Everywhere I went, I had to explain. At the bank, at the DMV, on the phone with people who spoke in terms like liability inheritance and posthumous financial exposure. I used to think my name meant something, that it came with a history I could be proud of. Now, it just felt like a key someone else had used to open the wrong doors. I did not ask for this, but it was mine now. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off. No distractions, no TV humming in the background. Just the soft ticking of the old wall clock and the hum of the refrigerator. I had laid everything out, every bill, every statement, every letter that had come in Dad's name or mine. It filled the entire surface, a mosaic of debt, lies, and signatures that never should have been mine. The weight of it all sat heavy in my chest. I stared at that mess for what felt like hours. Somewhere in the middle of it, I realized something simple but terrifying. I could do what he did. I could bury it. I could start shifting things around, move money from one place to another, lie when it got tight. Tell myself I was protecting my mom. Tell myself I was handling it for the sake of the family. It would be easy, honestly. The temptation was right there, humming in my ear like a whisper. Just cover it. You can fix it later. But I had seen how that story ends. I had lived through the explosion. And I knew, deep down, that if I repeated his pattern, I would be signing the same sentence he did. A life spent wearing a mask. A death surrounded by silence, with a legacy of damage disguised as dignity. No, it had to stop here. I started making a new list. Not of debts, but of actions. Step 1. Cut every account. Freeze everything with my name. File fraud complaints where I could. Face the ones I could not. Step 2. Sell what we did not need. I looked around the house and realized how many things were just sitting there, collecting dust while the roof over our heads wobbled under invisible weight. Step 3. Talk to Mom. Really talk. Tell her everything, even the parts that would break her heart. Because hiding the truth was what got us here in the first place. I stayed up past 2 that night writing it all out. Not for drama, not to play the hero, but because I needed something real to stand on. Not borrowed, not stolen, not built on fear, just honest ground. When I finally went to bed, I felt something I had not felt in weeks. Not peace exactly, but clarity. The next morning, I sat across from Mom at the kitchen table and told her everything. She did not interrupt. She barely blinked. She just held her coffee like it was the only thing keeping her hands steady, and let me talk. I told her about the credit cards, the forged accounts, the hidden loans. I showed her the documents with my name on them. The ones I never signed. The safe. The letter. When I was done, she sat in silence for a long time. Then she said, "He always promised we were safe." That was all. Just those 6 words. And I realized right then, she was not shocked. She was just shattered. Because the hardest part of all this was not the money. It was the betrayal. The man she built a life with had not just made mistakes. He had made choices. Repeatedly. Knowingly. And now she was left with the same hollow questions I had been asking myself since the first envelope was opened. Did he do it to protect us? Or to protect himself? Was it love? Or was it fear? I do not know. I probably never will. Some questions do not come with clean answers. But I do know this. Secrets rot. They do not disappear when the person who kept them dies. They just drift into the next set of hands, the next generation, waiting to explode. I spent weeks sorting through the fallout. I hired another lawyer, started repairing my credit, filed every piece of paperwork I needed to sever the ties between my name and his decisions. Some things I could fix. Others, well, I would be paying for those for years. Literally. But at least I knew what I was dealing with. And I made a decision. I would never put anyone else in that position. When I have a family of my own, they will know what I earn. They will know what we owe. We will talk about money like it is just another part of life. Not a dirty secret to bury under polite smiles and borrowed time. I will not live behind a mask. Because I have seen what that costs. Dad once told me, we live within our means. But that was not the truth. The truth was, we lived inside a lie. A house of cards that looked solid until the first breeze took it down. Now I am standing in the wreckage of it. And I am not building it back the same way. I am starting over. On real ground. Even if it takes everything I have to pour the foundation.